Good morning and welcome to the General Licensing Panel for the Red Lion Inn breed. My name is Councillor Curtis. This meeting is being held remotely and is being live streamed via YouTube, and the recording of it will be available afterwards on our website. Councillors, officers and speakers are reminded to put their mobile phone on silent if they have one near to them. Please mute your microphones when not speaking, as this will reduce feedback and background noise and saves bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. If you are a member of the panel, please leave your camera on. I will first do a roll call to check all those who are expected to attend are present. As I say your name, please turn on your microphone and confirm you are present. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Timpey.
Present.
And myself is here. Joining us today are Andy Eaton, Deputy Legal Services Manager.
Present.
Una Kane, Environmental Health Manager for the review of the applicant.
Present.
Mark Randolph, the Senior Environmental Health Licensing Officer.
Morning, present.
Thank you. Mr. John Woolsgrove from John Gaunt and Partners, representing Mrs. Natalie Campbell.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Philip Graham, on behalf of Mrs. Natalie Campbell Crabb, the premises licence holder.
Present.
And PC Jeffrey, the witness for the review applicant.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning, thank you. There are also two technical staff in the meeting to operate the live broadcast and to be on hand if there are any technical difficulties. That's Claire and Kieran. The Democratic Services Officer Committee Clerk today is Louise Hollingsworth.
Present.
Members of the panel who wish to speak, please indicate by typing your surname only in the chat facility. The chat facility is persistent in that it cannot be deleted, etc., and any inappropriate use would be deemed as a potential code of conduct matter. Officers wishing to respond to members' questions, please type interject. I will ask members who have asked a question if they wish to come back after receiving a response, so there is no need to type your surname into the chat facility again. It is a requirement that all members will have read the paperwork published on the website. Members are reminded not to press leave meeting if you need to leave the room. Just remember to turn off your cameras and microphone. Please be aware that there can be a time delay of around 5 seconds while a member appears on screen. The review application will be heard in accordance with the procedure previously issued to all parties. As the matter is a quasi-judicial hearing, the licensing lawyer will ensure that all aspects of the hearing will comply with the rules of national justice and the Human Rights Act. During the hearing, members may wish to ask questions of the applicant and the premises licence holders' representatives. It is not possible, unless the chairman specifically allows so, for parties to cross-examine each other. All questions need to be made through the chairman. The licensing lawyer will provide any legal direction for members and representatives if necessary, before members retire to make their decision. The hearing will be conducted in the following order: the licensing officer to introduce the report, followed by questions, applicant for the review, Environmental Health Department to present, and then questions, the licence holder to respond, followed by questions. There are no further representations, and then the review applicant to sum up, the licence holder to sum up, and then the concluding decision. Thank you.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the appointment of chairman. Can I have a nomination, please?
Can I appoint Councillor Curtis, please?
And the
Seconded.
seconder?
Seconded, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Curtis, you are chairman of this panel.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is the minutes to authorise me to sign the minutes of the meeting at a later date of the General Licensing Panel held on the 5th of March 2020 as a correct record of the proceedings?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. Are there any?
No, none received, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Item 4, any disclosure of interest pertaining to this case? No. Okay, thank you. Right, the next item is the report of the Executive Director and the application for the review of a premises licence. And I do believe that is to hand over to Mark Randolph for his report on that, please.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. Yes, the
Good morning.
report follows the standard format, and you should have 3 additional sets of papers with you as well, provided separately before the meeting. So the first one is some information supplied by Natalie Campbell-Crabb, dated 20th of July 2020. The second bit of additional information is an email from Chris Watchman, dated 16th of August, provided by the applicant.
Mhm.
And the third one is some additional information provided by the applicant from PC Jeffrey. That was provided this week, I believe.
Okay.
So everybody should have those. Back to the report, it follows the standard format. So the introduction states that the application for review has been made by the Council's Environmental Health Team for a review of the premises licence in respect of the Red Line at Breed, following a police report that the premises was open contrary to the controversial regulations which applied at the time. And the application for review basically relates to the failure of the premises licence holder to uphold the prevention of crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives. Section 1.1 sets out the applicant's details, and that's colleagues in the Environmental Health Team who are the responsible and enforcing authority for this premises within the meaning of the Health and Safety at Work Act. Page 2, the location. The premises is situated on the main road, the A28, at the southern end of the village of Breed. The surrounding properties are predominantly residential, with St George's Church opposite. Refer you to the location plan and photographs in appendices A and B on page 8 and page 9. On the premises website, they describe themselves as a family-run 15th century free house, serving an interesting range of freshly cooked dishes. The premises licence is reproduced at Appendix H, page 37, and the premises has the benefit of a licence which authorises the sale and supply of alcohol, on and off sales, regulated entertainment and late night refreshment. The premises licence holder is Natalie Campbell-Crabb of the Red Lion Inn Breed, and Natalie Campbell-Crabb is also the designated premises supervisor, and that's the person under the Licensing Act who's responsible for alcohol sales. And our database records show that the licence was transferred to Natalie Campbell-Crabb in around October 2018. Moving on to the application for the review, that's reproduced in full in Appendix C on page 11. Chair, with your permission, I won't read the application now. I'll leave that to the applicant to go through later on in the agenda.
Okay.
I'll just go through the main things. The application supporting relevant information can be found in appendices C, D, E, F and G on page 21, 23, 29 and 35. So in summary, the grounds for review are related to incidents that occurred at the premises on the 8th and 9th of May 2020. A, consumption of alcohol on the premises in contravention of the coronavirus regulations in place at that time. B, gatherings of more than 2 persons in contravention of the coronavirus regulations in place at that time. Failure to prevent the spread of the virus. D, contravention of Section 140 of the Licensing Act, and that's allowing disorderly conduct on the licensed premises. And there's some information about the specifics of that offence there. The applicant invites the panel to consider a review of the premises licence leading to the revocation of the licence or removal of the designated premises supervisor. And just for clarification at the bottom of page 3, not all licensing activities were prohibited at that time. That's the 8th and 9th of May. The premises was entitled to sell alcohol plus non-alcoholic drinks and food for individual consumption, but away from the premises. However, those parts of the premises should have been closed in which food or drink were previously sold for consumption on the premises, and all gatherings at the premises were prohibited at the time. Page 4, 2.1, just looking at our database records. Going back to 2015, show there are no licensing or noise-related complaints incidents recorded. Our records do show that a prohibition notice was served on the 9th of May 2020 on Natalie Campbell Crabb. The notice was served under the coronavirus regulations, and they required activities to cease immediately, and they were selling of food or drink for consumption on the premises, and secondly, close the premises or part of the premises in which food or drink are sold for consumption on the premises. The application review was subject to the usual public advertisement, and that was on our website, and also notices at the premises, and no representations from interested parties were received, that's neighbours, etc. Representations from responsible authorities 4, there were no representations from any other responsible authorities listed in the box. The premises licence holder has not submitted the formal comments or documents that she wanted included in the report. In summary, the review application relates to the failure to uphold the crime and sword and public safety licensing objectives during the coronavirus lockdown period, and the applicant invites the panel to consider reviewing the premises licence leading to revocation or removal of the DPS. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions? You're
No
muted,
questions.
PT.
No, thank you.
Jeffrey. Any questions at all?
No questions.
No. Okay, thank you. Right, we'll come to the next item is the applicant for review report. This is from Una Kane, who is the Environmental Health Department, to present her report, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everybody. On the evening of the 20th of March 2020, the Prime Minister took the unprecedented step of asking people to stay at home to save lives. The cause? Coronavirus. The country responded. Communities stayed at home, closed their businesses, kept children from school, and didn't visit the elderly and sick. On the 26th of March, legislation was passed prohibiting the gathering of 2 or more people from different households in public and legally requiring the closure of businesses. The Health Protection Coronavirus Restriction England Regulations 2020. This legislation was designed to prevent the virus from spreading by prohibiting the gathering of 2 or more persons from different households, Regulation 7. This prohibition applied to public places, including public houses. By the 1st of April, 2,900 people had died in England from coronavirus. These appalling figures do not tell us stories of individual suffering, but each of us has been touched by this pandemic and will never be the same. From the announcement of the lockdown, Environmental Health provided advice and support to business, which were allowed by law to be open, and in the main that was food takeaways. Pubs could open for both food and alcohol takeaway. Her Majesty's government recognised that financial recompense was needed to support businesses during this lockdown period. And on the 9th of March 2020, the Red Line Inn was given a business grant of £25,000 by Rother District Council. In effect, payment to be closed. Environmental health officers made regular patrols of Rother to ensure that businesses were closed and checked social distancing in those that were legally allowed to be open. We received very high numbers of calls of complaint and concern from residents, and each of these was investigated by an environmental health officer. I sent specific letters to various categories of businesses, including one to all licensed premises on the 17th of April. If I could ask you to look at your bundle for page 21 for a copy of this letter. I specifically want to draw your attention to the second paragraph in this letter. Let me read it. It says, most pubs and restaurants are acting responsibly and following the guidance issued. Unfortunately, this is not true for all businesses, and we are receiving an increasing number of reports where pubs and restaurants are continuing to serve some meals or drinks on the premises. It is not permitted to serve anyone other than members of your own household, be it customers, friends, or staff. Any business found to be doing so will be issued with a prohibition notice, fixed penalty, or you may face prosecution. An application to review the premises licence will also be made. By the 1st of May, 24,576 people had died in England from coronavirus. And by the end of the weekend in question, the 9th of May, that figure was 27,775. Public concern and anxiety was very high at this time. On the 8th of May, Sussex Police received several calls regarding activity at the Red Lion Inn. There were many comments on social media. Again, if I could just ask you to turn to page 30 in your bundle. And you will see a selection of the comments from social media. If I could just read you the very first one at the top of the page, it says this. Please tell me something is going to be done about the Red Lion Inn and Breed. Videos all over Facebook of people drinking outside the pub and the pub open during lockdown. As a pub owner myself, please tell me what is stopping us doing it if there are no consequences. Absolutely disgusting. If nothing is done, I can't see anyone else sticking to the rules, and it's not fair. We all want to be the heart of our community, but without killing them all from COVID-19 at the same time. Please make an example of them. And if you go further down to about halfway, there's one line and it says this. I was there, I waved at the camera. That was one comment on its own. And in reply, somebody else said, I hope you don't catch it. If you turn on to the next page, page 31, you will see a photograph taken from footage that was placed on social media at the time. And we have placed still photographs on page 31, page 32, and page 33. PC Jeffrey of Sussex Police attended the Red Lion Inn on this date, and his statement is produced on page 23 of your report. In response to this, Mrs. Campbell-Crabb produced a statement that was sent separately to you all and is not included in the public report. To rebut Mrs. Campbell-Crabb's statement, I asked PC Jeffrey to produce a second statement, which was sent to you earlier this week. In view of the allegations made by Mrs. Campbell-Crabb against PC Jeffrey, he is attending this morning. I would now like to invite PC Jeffrey to give his evidence. PC Jeffrey, what did you see when you arrived at the Red Lion Inn?
So, good morning. I'd been deployed to Canberra Sands that afternoon to support police on a public order operation due to the amount of people that were attending the beach. So on return, we were having a convoy when we received a call asking if we could visit the Red Line due to numerous reports received that afternoon or early evening of between 20 to 30 people gathering outside of the premises, all drinking and not conforming to social distance regulations. So I arrived at the premises shortly after 17-15 hours that day, and the numbers were slightly less than initial reports, but I would still estimate there was at least a dozen people still outside the premises. Mr. Graham was stood in the doorway of the entrance to the pub, and around him was tables set out with empty metal trays that contained food and remains of food, empty glasses around, and of the approximate dozen people that were around the company of Mr. Graham, majority of them were all intoxicated. My colleagues remained outside to try and disperse the patrons, whilst I went inside and spoke with Mr. Graham. During the conversation, it was announced that the pub was open, but not trading, as they were giving their alcohol away as a fundraising event and asking for donations to raise money for the NHS and the nurses that were fighting the battle against COVID-19. A discussion was made over the rules and regulations, and the pub was cleared of the patrons, and Mr. Graham and Miss Natalie Campbell-Clark were warned that they needed to cease trading immediately. I was probably inside the premises for about half an hour with them. When I left the premises, my colleagues had successfully dispersed all of the patrons that were outside, and we returned to our duties.
Thank you. Have you concluded on that?
I mean, I can read my full statement if I wish to go through certain points and certain
yes, please. Sorry, I just thought your connection had broken up, but no, that's fine. Yeah, please continue.
Okay, so certainly what I observed when I arrived was the high level of intoxication. I certainly don't suspect the premises had only just opened. So I believe in the innkeeper report and statement, there were patrons outside. They were all bright red. It was a very, very hot sunny day, hence the reason why we had to go to the beach, because the weather attracted the numbers. People were sunburnt and intoxicated. They hadn't just arrived there. Mr. Graham himself was actually quite quarrelsome to start off with, and actually accused me of disturbing his fundraising event, and personally accused me of removing the money as such, spoiling a fundraising event to raise money for the NHS at that time. I was quite happy that Mr. Graham was in the process of taking payment for these alcohols, because as per my statement, there were glasses of different levels of alcohol inside. Some were full, some were empty, and there were small piles of money alongside these glasses. Each pile of money somewhere probably, I'd estimate, between £2 to £4. The tills were off and there was no receipts. However, there was cash quite openly on display in the bar. That conversation with Mr. Graham probably lasted about 10-15 minutes before his partner came down and joined us in the bar. She introduced herself and explained that she was the premises licence holder. I noticed that Mrs. Natalie Campbell-Clark was very unsteady on her feet. She was drunk. She smelled of intoxicating liquor, and we were actually at one point sort of struggling to have a bit of a conversation. Again, looking around the premises, the bar area was in use, although there were no patrons inside. When I went in, when we arrived in a large convoy of 5 very large police vans, because we'd been to the beach. So anybody that would have seen the vehicles arriving would have had a chance to disperse. And as in my statement, as we pulled up alongside, some of the patrons actually picked up their glasses and started walking away. I believe they were walking away because they knew that what they were doing was wrong and that they were leaving the area to avoid any potential prosecutions by police for breaking the social distancing rules.
Okay. So, in your opinion, PC Jeffries, had it have been, or we're told that it was a fundraising event, that wouldn't necessarily be the actions of people that were raising money for the NHS, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And just referring back to my statement or the Liz Dinkipp report, that there was no advertising of the event. There was no posters. There was no charity buckets or collection buckets on display. The bar itself was open for normal trading, like I explained. Pints of beer, empty glasses, and small piles of cash.
Okay. Thank you for your report. Are there any questions, please, from the panel?
Yes, I did put it in chat, Chairman. Thank you.
I just saw that, Councillor, sorry.
That's okay. Hello, PC Jeffries. Could you just confirm, did any other person say that it was an NHS event that you were gathered there?
Nobody actually said that to me, because when I went inside the premises to the bar area, it was only myself and Mr. Graham, and then like I said, 10 minutes later, Ms. Crabb joined us. My colleagues outside that were dispersing the people, none of them came to say it was a fundraising event, and as I said, there was no signage, no posters, no banners or bunting, nothing to suggest that the premises was having a
so no confirmation from any other person.
No.
Is that correct?
There was also no signs on display sort of asking for donations for the food or the alcohol that was being consumed.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? PC Jeffries, I have a question, if I may. In your on your visit to the premises, obviously they're trying to put great heed on the fact that it was donating money to the NHS, which is a first class action, and especially as Una has already intimated about the seriousness of this pandemic that we've all endured to date and continue to do so. As the emphasis was on the NHS, in your opinion, were people social distancing? Because obviously, if they were in such a case that they were adhere, it's the NHS has been it's drummed into us to protect lives, save lives, etc. Would you say that they were following the basic rules of social distancing at the time?
Certainly, by the time I arrived, which as the statement says is 1750 hours, the group of people that sat outside the premises was still very similar to the image that's applied on page 31. There was multiple chairs and approximately 2 to 3 wooden-style pub benches that were all occupied by people.
Yeah,
I didn't speak to the patrons outside. That was with my colleagues. But the makeup and majority of that group were middle-aged males. Again, not your average sort of makeup of a family. I was expecting couples or children. It was predominantly middle-aged males that were still sat around in chairs and tables. Again, using the image on page 31, it shows the aspect of the door to the premises.
Yeah.
The tables were still that distance away, so to have in excess of a dozen people within no more than approximately 8 to 10 square meters would have been outside the recommended distancing, social distancing.
Yeah. Well, you can see that's why I wanted your opinion, because just by looking at the picture, one would assume that it was a normal day from long ago that we all remember gathering outside of a pub. But
absolutely, and the other thing which I perhaps haven't included in my statement, it's obvious as per the photograph on page 31, was that the furniture used outside of the premises, not only was it from the doorway, but it extended actually onto the curtilage of the carriageway. So any pedestrians that would have had to go past the premises on that side of the carriageway would have had to actually walk into the road to observe the 2 metre recommendations from that people standing and drinking their beers.
okay, thank you very much, Peter.
Chair,
Jeffrey.
Chair, just to interrupt you just before we leave, it may be an appropriate moment, I think, at this stage for PC Jeffries to deal with the rebuttal email which he sent late. It will save going sort of forwards and backwards if he deals with that issue as well at this particular moment in time.
Okay, that's fine. If you carry on, PC Jeffries.
So this will be the email that I sent on the 19th.
Yes, the email which you sent in this week. Yeah, if you could deal with that issue as well, because it saves coming back again at a later stage.
Okay, is there a particular point within that email that you'd like me to address, or because it covers my response to probably half a dozen defences that the premises licence holder has produced?
Andy?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, at the end of the day, PC Jeffrey, this is your evidence. So ultimately, yes, I know the members have got it in written form. It's whether or not you want to go through it. If you don't, if you want it to stand as a statement which they can read, that's entirely fine. What I'm trying to do is sort of prevent a toing and froing from everybody. So the opportunity for you to deal with your evidence in its entirety, but
Sure.
the members can read it if you just prefer them to read it.
Okay, that's fine. There's a few things within that email, then I'll try and highlight out. So one of the defences provided was that the premises was closed and that the premises was in a state of refurbishment. Now, when I went inside the premises, I can confirm that the area on the map marked as the dining and music area was in fact fully closed off, covered with items that were used for decorating and for storage. However, the same area on the map marked as the bar area was not in any state of decorating. It was fully open for business. There is a Google stock photograph which I did send, which I don't know has been passed on, but from Google, if you Google the premises, it shows photographs of the bar. The bar was in the exact condition that I saw it on that day. There was no evidence of decorating going on. Also, Mrs. Campbell-Clark has supplied a photograph. One of the photographs shows a number of people sitting on a grass verge, which is to demonstrate that the members were socially distanced. I had a look at this photograph and it didn't appear as if it was taken outside the premises. So I've done some research on the Street View and I've actually found the photograph of unknown persons sat on a grass bank, all nicely socially distanced. It's actually taken on the junction of Stub Lane and the A28, which is over 120 metres away from the premises. So that's 400 foot. I don't believe that photograph was taken containing patrons of that premises that afternoon at that location.
Okay.
Yes, so Ms. Campbell-Clark also, in her defence, provides a list of names of families that they knew that were in attendance that day. I unfortunately don't have the names of everybody that's outside the premises. I was inside dealing with the PLH and the DPS. It was my colleagues outside, and as per my instructions, we've been using a policy of the 4 E's to disperse crowds, and that would be to explain and to educate and encourage people to leave. And if they complied with those instructions, then the fourth thing, which is enforcement, wasn't conducted. So the names and addresses of all the people were not collected, so that cannot be clarified. However, I refer back to my earlier point of these were all predominantly male, middle-aged. They didn't appear to be all members of one or two families. And also, initially, when I spoke to Mr. Graham, when I first arrived at the premises, Mr. Graham actually tried to tell me that the people outside his premises were his guests, and that they were all regulars to his to the premises, and that he wouldn't invite people that he didn't know to the premises. These were all regulars that he knew and trusted, and would let him know if they were unwell. I cannot see how that gives consent or permission to allow that rule to be broken. I think that pretty much covers it. There was that last part of the paragraph which explains some personal information that Crab told me. I don't think that's ready for the general public domain, but it highlights that we had a conversation. She claims that we didn't really speak at all and we didn't talk about things, and the only thing that Ms. Campbell Crab did was provide the copy of the Part B of the licence and her own personal alcohol licence for me. We did have a conversation. We had quite a lengthy conversation about COVID and responsibilities of the premises, responsibilities of the premises licence holders. If she cannot remember that conversation that we had, then I would suggest perhaps that the amount of alcohol that she consumed and her intoxication level that afternoon may have caused her to forget our conversation. And again, her intoxication levels are recorded in my statement, and the fact that she actually continued consuming alcohol in my presence whilst I was trying to explain to her that the premises should be closed, and to sort of ask her to understand the severity of what was actually going on that afternoon while I was present in the premises.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any further questions for PC Jeffries?
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
I think in the chat there was a request from Mr. Walsgrove, and then I had to address through the chair.
You did, yes. It's all right. It broke
and
up
then I
there.
had one. That's okay.
Mr. Walgrove, would you like to ask a question?
I would, through you, Chair, if you don't mind. It's simply on your arrival, PC Jeffrey, did you or any other officer see any customer exit the inside of the premises, or was it just the people outside that you saw?
I don't recall seeing anybody leaving the premises. Like I explained, we'd all merged together as a police support unit in Canvas Sands, and we come from lots of different parts of the county. I'd come across with a colleague of mine all the way from Chichester, so we'd all work in public support vehicles. So where I actually parked my vehicle, I was perhaps, I think, the lead or the second vehicle that parked up. So I actually parked ahead of the premises. I wouldn't have seen the front door of the premises when I arrived, because our vans don't have rear view mirrors. But certainly I was quite quickly out of the vehicle, speaking to Mr. Graham, and went inside to the bar area with Mr. Graham, and I didn't see any patrons inside.
Okay, thank you. And subsequent to the visit on the 8th of May, have you or any colleagues from the police had any cause to revisit the Red Line for any issue of concern?
That unfortunately is a question I can't really answer, because I am a West Sussex police officer. I only came to East Sussex that afternoon as part of the Sussex Police's response to the COVID-19 Operation Apollo, which was a public order supporting to deal with large crowds, masses, premises that were breaching the rules. So unfortunately, it's not my day-to-day place of business. So I have not had any need to return back to Breed or the premises.
Okay, thank you, PC Jeffrey. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walgrove. Councillor Timby, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The photographs that you've supplied on 31, 32 and 33, I presume there's some sort of date evidence as to when they were taken?
My apology, but the photographs supplied on 31, 32 and 33 are not photographs.
I beg your pardon?
The images supplied on pages 31, 32 and 33, they're not my photographs. They're not my exhibits.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
If I may, Chair, if I may make a point here, please. Councillors, the photographs on pages 31, 32 and 33, I have taken from footage that was circulating on social media at the time.
Okay.
Zard, you okay with that, Councillor?
Yeah, so sorry, but a photograph can be uploaded that has been taken previously, I assume.
Oh yes, I'm not in any way assuring you that they were, because there's clearly no date on these. What I'm saying is these were widely in the public domain, and this is what was attracting so many comments on social media.
Okay.
At the time.
Right. Thank you, Una.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, Councillor Brown, have we got... We lost you, Graham. I don't know if you can hear us, but...
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
can I hear you?
That's better.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about that. Technical issues here, I'm afraid. Thank you. Just to, the questions I was going to ask have been asked about the social distancing. I'm not sure about the photos, and obviously the advertising of the event, was it relayed? There was one other question that I just wanted clarification on. Really, was that you said it was a very hot day, and people had very red faces. And if I remember correctly, you said they all looked intoxicated. Could you just clarify? Did you speak to many, and just possibly clarify a little bit more on that situation?
Yep. Okay. So when I first arrived, and this actually ties in and hopefully can answer the previous question. Going back to photographs, the top photograph on page 32.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the top photograph of page 32, it shows the entrance to the premises. Not the clearest of photographs, but there is a table, a trestle table that's going in front of the premises. This trestle table, as per my statement, were the big metal servery trays, which contained food and the remains of food. So the photograph as supplied on the top of page 32 is very, very similar to what I saw that on my arrival. So the table was there at the doorway, almost as if it was a temporary bar where food was. Drinks may have been brought out there because there were full drinks on the table. So I was stood outside probably just for a minute or two when I first arrived to speak to Mr. To try and identify who was actually in charge, and that's where I established that Mr. Graham was, as such, in control of the event. So in that minute or two before I established that Mr. Graham was in charge and could we go inside and speak, that's when I got to listen, view, also smell. The customers that were outside, there was a lot of alcohol around. Everyone was well, I say everyone, the majority of the people there, as well as drunk, were jovial and in a good mood. However, there were some patrons that were not happy to see the police, accused of being the fun police, breaking up a good afternoon. But because of the amount of other people that stood outside the place, hence the reason why I asked Mr. Graham to go inside so we could talk and not be disturbed by the customers. I had a very small interaction with the customers outside, and that's why I very quickly formed my opinion that a lot of them were intoxicated and had been there quite a while due to some very bright sunburnt faces.
Okay, thank you, PC. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Una, can I come back to you? just to clear that you've finished any submissions before I move on to the next report, please? Are you there, Una?
Yes, indeed. I am sorry, I had my mute on.
Okay.
Of course, many thanks, of course, to PC Jeffries for his statement this afternoon. And just to conclude, of course, that we've heard PC Jeffries' opinion that the red line was open, that alcohol was being consumed and had been for some time. And further, that several people were gathered.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, PC Jeffrey has spoken about the behaviour of both the licensee, Mrs. Campbell-Crabb, and her partner.
Right.
So to be clear, it's the law, the Health Protection Coronavirus Restriction England regulations about the gathering of 2 or more people in a public place. To me, it's clear that this has been breached. Further breached by the sale of alcohol and the consumption of food also on the licensed premises. Now, these social media posts that we have been had a quick look at show that the knowledge of this incident was widely known in the local community and potentially undermined the compliance of other licensed businesses and premises. Yeah. The comments also on social media show serious legitimate concern for public health and safety at a time of a global pandemic. And particularly that one that I referenced earlier, the goading by one of the drinkers could incite violence, especially as people's identities, of course, are visible online.
Mm.
So my conclusion is that these events in May were planned and reckless act by the licence holder and designated premises supervisor, Mrs. Campbell-Crabb, who should be in control of the premises at all times. I therefore recommend to the licensing panel to consider revoking the premises licence or removing the designated premises supervisor from the licence for not complying with the crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives. And that concludes my presentation.
Many thanks. Thank you very much. Right. I now call on the, so we don't have the licence holder in attendance today, I understand. I believe it's Mr. Walsgrove that is representing. Is that correct, Mr. Walsgrove?
Yes, that's right, Chair. I did have a couple of questions for the Environmental Health Officer, if I may, sir.
Please do. Yes, are you happy with that, Una?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the enforcement or the letter that you sent out to licensed premises, you've said that you'd had a number of complaints from members of the public about licensed premises being open, and in fact that's what it says, that you are aware that has happened. And then I think on page 29 you have said that 8 enforcement notices have been issued within your district and prompt action has been taken, and I think the red line was issued with one of those prohibition notices, wasn't it?
Yes,
on the 11th of May. That's what we've heard.
Yep.
How many premises licenses have you reviewed other than the red line?
This is the first one.
Why is there a difference between all those other premises you know that have been trading unlawfully in breach of the regulations and the red line? What has singled this premises out for you?
Well, the other enforcement notices actually related to different types of businesses, and some of whom for which a review would not be appropriate, because actually there were different types of premises. There was a caravan site and other categories of businesses. Now, in this particular matter, it was very clear to me there was extensive concern in the local community as to what had been happening here, based on the number of complaints that we had from the local community, not only that was directed to us, but it was equally directed to Sussex Police.
Okay, thank you. Just in relation to the 9th of May then, because we've heard all the evidence about the 8th of May, do you accept that the only evidence in relation to the 9th of May is your reference to a hearsay conversation with PCSO Collins.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the 9th of May, you will see, if you wish to have a look again at the social media posts, you will see there are still comments on the 9th of May about music and activity at the Red Lion. PCSO went along but wasn't convinced. So therefore, yes, I accept your position on that one.
Yeah. Would you also agree that social media posts are not evidence which can be relied on? You haven't sought to establish who those persons were to take statements from them, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
I'm grateful. That's all the questions I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsgrove. Okay, moving on. We come back to yourself, Mr. Walsgrove. You're representing the licence holder today. If you'd like to go ahead with your responses, please.
I'm grateful. Thank you, Councillor. The first thing to do, obviously, is issue a formal apology on behalf of the licence holder for the fact that you're having to deal with a review, and for the fact that your environmental health officer and the police have obviously been engaged in some considerable time, not only in visiting the premises on that day, but obviously these review proceedings. My client is acutely aware of the tough job that both the environmental health and police have had to do during this time, and certainly would not have wished to have exacerbated that work. I will, of course, provide their account of what happened on that day, which is slightly different from what you've heard from the police officer and from environmental health, but certainly that apology is most heartfelt. Unfortunately, Natalie can't be with us today due to ill health, but her partner, as you know, is on the line for the hearing. So the officer described this as a planned and reckless act, and I hope after hearing from me, you will think about that very carefully, because it certainly wasn't as described as a planned and reckless act. What I don't want to do is challenge all the evidence line by line. So although I have asked a few questions of the officer and the police officer, it wouldn't be the right forum to go through and challenge everything. But there are some things which do need to be put in some context to allow you to decide what is the most appropriate and proportionate response for the revocation. I think it's always useful in any application, whether it's for a review of the licence or a new licence application, to try and establish where there are competing sets of facts, to understand, well, what can be agreed, what facts can be agreed. And I just want to set out for you a few statements which will support my ultimate contention that you should not be revoking this licence. So you heard that the government shut licensed premises from the 21st of March, and an announcement was made, although the regulation regarding that closure didn't follow until later. However, the licence holder did comply and close the premises from the 21st of March, and they remained closed. This is an agreed fact because there's no evidence to suggest otherwise, until the 7th of May. So that's 47 days of closure and compliance with the regulation, which is undisputed. We also then have a period of trading from the 10th of May to the 3rd of July. And obviously premises were allowed to reopen on the 4th of July, where again, there's no evidence that the premises was open. And so that's 54 days of compliance with the regulations of being closed. We also have the premises reopen on the 4th of July, and they've traded right the way up until yesterday. And there's no evidence to suggest that the premises have had any issues with compliance with the government guidance on COVID and the regulations regarding COVID. So again, that's another 47 days of compliance with those regulations. And prior to the closure on the 21st of March, Natalie took the premises in October 2018, and there has been no issues raised with the management of those premises from October 2018 to the 21st of March, and that's 18 months where this premises has traded perfectly well and within the law. Another agreed fact is there are no other representations. So the Environmental Health Officer has submitted the application. None of the responsible authorities have objected, including the police, made no representation. I appreciate we have PC Jeffrey as a witness, but the police in your area have decided not to make a representation, and nor have any of the residents of that village or anybody else further afield who may have been posting social media posts about this premises. That's an agreed fact. I have to say I was somewhat surprised that, given how serious the Environmental Health Officer is saying this situation was, it took 53 days for that review application to be issued. If there was such serious concern about this premises breaching COVID regulations and the threat to public health, why did it take so long for an application to review the licence be put in? So that, in my respectful submission, would suggest that it was a one-off on the 8th of May. I will address you shortly to say there isn't any evidence about the 9th of May, and you should discount that entirely. So we're dealing about one particular day. Before I come on to the 8th of May, though, I just want to give you a bit of background about the licence holder and her partner Philip. They took a 10-year lease of this property back in October 2018, and their total investment in this property is over 6 figures. It's a substantial investment. Importantly, this is their family home, so it's not just the Red Lion village pub, the 15th century pub. This is where they live. It is their home. Shortly after they took on the premises, Philip rather sadly was diagnosed with cancer, and that took him away from working in the business for quite some considerable time, and left Natalie effectively in day-to-day management as Philip underwent treatment. And in fact, it's only this year in January where Philip has been able to return to work and take on some of the responsibility of managing those premises with Natalie. Unfortunately, that was a must, because Natalie's mother passed away in late December, and she has also had issues of a family nature in relation to one of her children, which has meant she has not been as involved in the business as she had been right up to that point, although she still does work there on occasion. But effectively, the management responsibility has been delegated to Philip, her partner and business partner. So as you've heard, this is a 15th century typical village pub. It's what I would describe as a stereotypical English village pub, and is frequented by lots of the local people in the village. And it is the heartbeat of that local community. And revoking the licence not only effectively punishes the licence holder, but it would have a severely detrimental effect on all of the people that live there and use this premises. So all in all, this is a very well run, much loved pub that's at risk of losing its licence for what happened on the 8th of May. And I will now just move on to say what the licence holder says about their perspective of what happened on that day. So, as you will be well aware, the 8th of May was VE Day, and the villagers decided that they would mark the occasion by, I think a street party is a grandiose term, effectively for the village to get together with people sat outside their houses with food, with drink, and the villagers were walking up and down the street and saying hello to each other. So there was a general spirit of community on that day. It came to pass, as I said, it's Philip's house. He joined in what the whole village were doing, and he had food outside, and yes, he had prepared food that he was happy for people to come and share. He wasn't charging for that, and neither was he charging for any drinks. There was no pre-planned event to raise money for the NHS. Essentially what happened was Philip spoke to, when the neighbours were coming around and saying hello, Philip spoke to them and said if they wanted to have a drink, he had a stock of beer that was going to go off because he had no idea when they were going to be reopened, and if anybody wanted to have a drink, then he was happy to let them have a free drink. And that initially was what was happening. So people would come and say hello and they would get a free drink. After an hour or so, one of his neighbours suggested that rather than him give away the beer, that he asked people for a donation towards the NHS, and that's how that came about. And so from then on, he was taking donations from people, so not specifically charging a price for certain drinks, just whatever they felt appropriate to give to the NHS, particularly because, of course, he had been in hospital with treatment for such a long period of time with cancer treatment.
Yeah.
So you will have seen, I'm sure, from national and local press coverage, similar situations on VE Day where local people got together in terms of the street parties where they would be out in their front gardens on the street, putting their own tables and chairs outside and commemorating that day. And that's essentially what was happening here. This was Philip's home. The pub was not open for business. Nobody went inside that pub, and nobody went into the rear pub garden, which is a much larger place where if he'd been open that day and wanted to sell alcohol, then that would have been the place where he would have asked people to go, because then they wouldn't be sat at the picnic benches at the front of the premises on full view to everybody. If you're going to try and open a premises in breach of regulations, you're not going to do it in the way that's been alleged. So that's why PC Jeffrey couldn't find any posters or anything about any event on the day, because it wasn't pre-planned. It was a spur of the moment thing. And even in taking instructions, I had to explain very carefully to Philip that a charity donation is nonetheless constituted as a retail sale of alcohol, which is why he accepts that there has been a breach of the regulation. So that part of the review is accepted, that on the 8th of May, because they took donations for drink, they have breached that regulation. But it was only for a short period of time on one day, which should be balanced against all the other period of trading before the 8th and after the 8th, in compliance with COVID.
Yeah.
Now, I say it took
just a quick question. How much was actually raised for the NHS on that occasion?
Yeah, so not very much, because not very much beer was sold. So it was a little over £100. He is continuing with the donations to the NHS and asking customers for charity. He's got a little over £300 now, and he will be donating it to the ward where he was treated for cancer.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to the issue about whether he knew what was happening was a breach of the regulations. Outside, as I said, nobody went into the premises at all day, so there were no neighbours were allowed into the premises. Now, what he didn't realise, the picnic benches that are out the front, even though that's not on the plan for the licence, so is an outside space, and effectively any sale for people sat outside there would be treated as an off sale, because section 182 of the Secretary of State's guidance says just that in relation to pub gardens, if they're not included as part of the licensed premises on the licence, then all sales in those areas are off sales. But of course, the COVID regulations change that, because they basically say any outside area is part of the licensed premises. So that law did, and it's a subtle change to the law, which I'm fairly confident, from having dealt with a few issues for other clients, that is not something which was commonly known, that outside areas, every outside area would constitute part of their licensed premises, and would be completely against the guidance that currently is in place under section 182. What he has to accept, and why an apology has been given, and a heartfelt one at that, is that ignorance of the law, as we all know, is no excuse. Licence holders must know what the law is, no matter how subtle it is. But there we are. That he's not saying, you know, it's an excuse. It's his explanation. And obviously, bringing a review has been a salutary lesson for him and Natalie about the care that will be needed to continue to run the premises as they have before, without any issues at all. It's a lovely little village pub that doesn't come to the attention of either the local authority or the police, other than this one day. Now, you've read in Natalie's email concerns about one of their neighbours. I don't propose to mention that at all. All I would say in relation to the social media post is that is not good evidence, and that is not evidence on which you should rely. All you should rely on is the evidence you've heard from PC Jeffrey, because he was there. And in relation to his comments about Natalie, yes, she did have a drink. It's her home. She says she was not drunk, but she had been drinking, and there's nothing wrong with somebody drinking in their own home. So I'm not sure whether the disorderly conduct allegation is aimed against her for being intoxicated as a DPS and licence holder, because that certainly isn't made out, because the pub wasn't open and she wasn't even there for most of the day. She'd only returned to the premises not long before the police got there. Or whether the disorderly conduct is in relation to the customers that were outside the premises. But again, yes, they had been drinking. Philip would say those persons were not drunk, and you've seen that they have said that those families were two households, and those two households were socially distant, so they were sat together in their own household. Now, the police can't verify who those persons were, although PC Jeffrey says that in his view they couldn't be members of the same household. Well, that's his opinion. It would have been easy to ask for their names and addresses and to get that information. And indeed, my instructions are that another officer did come into the premises whilst PC Jeffrey was talking to the licence holders to say that on speaking to some of those customers, they'd all given the same name, family name. So there we are. I would like you all to just reflect on the evidence that's been adduced in the context of how this premises has been managed before lockdown and during lockdown. It was a mistake on the day. He should not have allowed donations to have been made for the alcohol. Had he not taken those donations, there would have been no case for a review of this premises licence. He's not made any commercial profit from this. Any money that was taken is going to the NHS, as I've said. However, the consequence of a revocation would have severe financial impact on both he and Natalie, and as I've said, a significant detriment to this village. You will know as an experienced committee, but I'm duty bound to remind you what the Section 182 guidance says about how to deal with licence reviews, and it says that a committee should only take action which is no more than is appropriate and proportionate to address the cause of concern. So obviously the cause for concern here, in my respectful submission, is the spread of the coronavirus or the potential risk for the spread of that virus. I would say that risk was confined to that one day because you have no evidence that there was any concern before, and you've had no evidence that there has been any concern since, and the premises has reopened and is following guidance. So in terms of addressing the concern of risk, I would say that has already been met, and I would invite the committee to deal with this review application by issuing a warning to the licence holder about future conduct, and to ensure that they are acutely aware of what the law requires them to do in any given situation, so that if they are planning to do anything out of the norm, that they either seek advice from the responsible authorities or from me to ensure that what they're doing is lawful. So once again, I echo the apology on behalf of my clients. Obviously, I can answer any questions that you may have, and obviously Philip is on the line if there's anything specific about the running of the pub.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Timpey, I think you've got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hello, Mr. Walsgrove. Based on what you've just said about it just being one instance, are you actually alluding to the fact that someone can create or do something incorrect or something wrong, and then if they don't do anything wrong for the next 2 years or whatever, that mitigates the incorrect action?
In terms of a premises licence review, yes, that's right, because as I said, what your obligation is to do is to address the cause that's been raised in the review, the concerns that it's expressed, and take only action which is appropriate and proportionate.
Right, yeah, I'm aware of that.
Yeah, so the criminal law is there to punish, and as you know, there were sanctions that could have been brought against the licence holder to punish them for it. A review is not about punishment. So my reiteration of how the premises has been well managed is to say there were no issues before. It was that one day. There's been no issues since. Why would you revoke a licence that can be perfectly proper and well managed?
Mr. Walsgrove, we haven't decided on any course of action yet. We are merely hearing the evidence, and we need to be clear from every angle, and then we can make a balanced judgment from there. So I do understand your concerns, but of course we're fully aware of what our obligations are. So if we can keep it a bit brief on that, please.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I wasn't suggesting that you had in mind you were going to revoke it. That's what the officers asked for, and so that's the point I addressed.
I was simply trying to understand your reference to the before and after. In her statement, Natalie Crabb, she says, "I was at another VE Day celebration," indicating to me that she was aware that there was going to be a VE Day celebration around the premises. And also the statement that you in your particular evidence that Mr. Graham encouraged people to actually come to outside his premises. Did I understand that correctly?
No, he didn't encourage people to come to the premises. So let me deal with the first point.
You used the word encouraged because I wrote it down, but carry on.
So dealing with the first point, Natalie knew that the village were planning to effectively commemorate that day by coming out and having food and drink, you know, in their front gardens, and that was her knowledge of what was happening. She didn't know what Philip was going to do later in terms of taking donations. Okay. So for Philip's position, as I said, it's his home. He was only doing what everybody else was doing, which was sitting outside. But yes, he accepts that he cooked food which would have been too much for him to eat, and neighbours were walking up and down the lane talking to each other, and so that's why he decided that he would cook food for them to share. And when they came and said hello and had the food, he offered them a drink.
Okay, but in her statement also, there's the admission that there were 2 families and a Mr. Jones. So that's considerably more than the 2 people gathering. Would you agree?
Sorry, yes, it's more than 2 people. Their account is that the 2 groups of people, they were 2 households. So, and the 2 households were socially distanced from each other. They still shouldn't have been sat there drinking, and that I've explained that that's the situation. That is a breach of the regulations which they've accepted.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Una, I think you've got a question.
Thank you very much, Chair. Not so much a question, indeed, as a remark. With regard to the point of the benches outside the premises and people sitting on there and having a drink or eating, all the way through this very wretched pandemic, we as a department have been very clear with businesses. The property at the seating areas outside of the business should have been under the control of the business. And we had this point with several businesses, not just this one. They should have had control over those seating areas. And what is of concern there, of course, is the gathering of 2 or more people from different households. That was my point. The other point was about VE Day. In the time coming up to VE Day, we were giving extensive advice to local communities on how to celebrate safely, not to have a central focal point that people would be attracted to. That was the issue. We kept on telling local communities it was entirely acceptable for individual families to have their celebration within their own gardens, within their own property, but not to have that focal point that would attract people, because then that would, of course, mean people were meeting and mingling and so on. So just those 2 points. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In answer to, or to follow on from that, I think I would agree, because I understand from various villages that the same, and it was a serious issue, it still is a serious issue, but it was an issue, and we were all absolutely frightened to observe these requirements, and the social distancing was was a minimum requirement. So I am a bit surprised on some of the that groups of people were mixing in such a environment with no social distancing. I think I'm still worried about it now, so I'm just a bit concerned on that. But thank you anyway.
Just on that point, sir, the submission on behalf of the licence holder is that was 2 households and that 1 individual, and as the 2 households and that 1 individual, they were socially distanced. So that was taking account of those concerns around social distancing. What my client accepts is that he should not have allowed them to sit down and spend any time outside his premises, but they were in their own households.
Yeah. Okay, I understand that. There must be big households then. That's
Sure, just for clarity, do we know the name of the 2 households?
Mr. Walsgrove?
I think Miss Campbell named the families in her email.
She names them as the Piper family and Mr. Steve's family and then Mr. David Jones. But I would suggest we look at the photograph on page 31, where I don't observe, even if they are families, I don't observe any social distancing whatsoever.
Well, it also begs the question that when the police arrived, why so many people decided that they would vacate at short notice. So there's a question anyway. This is all things for us to debate later.
Just on that point, sir, I must come back to you. And it is, everybody's making assumptions as to what people did and where they went. But of course, when you see a lot of police vans turn up, the fact that they were together, even if they're socially distanced, even if their own household, they are not supposed to be out in public together. So they would have been concerned that they should have been in their own garden in any event. They would have known that. So it's yes, I understand that. It was just merely an observation, point for observation.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions before we move on? No further questions. Who have we got? No. Okay. So could I have called back to Una to there are no further submission, further representations now. Could I call on Una for the review applicant to sum up, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. You've heard PC Jeffrey's opinion that the Red Lion Inn was open. Alcohol was being consumed on site and had been for some time. Further, that several people were gathered. PC Jeffrey described the behaviour of the licensee, Mrs. Campbell-Crabb, and her intoxication. The law, the Health Protection Coronavirus Restriction England regulations, was breached by a gathering of more than 2 people in a public place. It was further breached by the sale and consumption of alcohol and food on the licensed premises. The social media post showed that the knowledge of this incident was widely known in the local community and potentially undermined the compliance of other licensed premises and businesses. The comments on social media show serious, legitimate concerns for public health and safety at a time of a global pandemic. The goading of one of the drinkers could incite violence, especially as people's identity were visible online. These events in May were planned in reckless act by the premises licence holder and designated premises supervisor, Mrs. Campbell-Crabb, who should be in control of the premises at all times. I therefore recommend the licensing panel to consider revoking the premises licence or removing the designated premises supervisor from the licence for not complying with the crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walsgrove, would you like to sum up on behalf of the licence holder?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, obviously repeat the apology given by the licence holder. Just one remark before I sum up in relation to the DPS being there to control the premises at all times. That isn't right. A DPS cannot be at the licensed premises all the time they are open, and nor is that a legal requirement, and that's clear in the Section 182 guidance. So that's not a correct statement to make. Natalie was not there on the day. Philip, her partner and business partner, was there. It's their home, and he had been assisting. So when Natalie is not working, then Philip would be in charge. But equally, they could appoint another manager to look after the pub. It's not a case of being there 7 days a week. So that's a slightly misleading statement. So I hope you take that into account in determining whether, as one of the sanctions, you should remove Natalie as the designated premises supervisor, because she was not there on the day and it wasn't her decision in relation to taking donations for the alcohol. That was Philip's decision.
John, just before you begin to sum up, I'm going to give a directive to the members that, because the members are aware that the designated premises supervisor are the first point of contact and are responsible for the premises. I accept there is no requirement for them to be there at all times, but if they choose to leave the management of the premises to somebody else, it is the DPS who is responsible ultimately for the behaviour, whoever they leave in charge, where it leads to an issue such as this. Do you not accept that point?
I do accept that they've got to put somebody responsible in charge, and yes, they can be vicariously liable for that conduct.
But it's not they can be, they are in law. That's what the designated premises supervisor is for. That's why you have one, so that there is ultimately an individual who is responsible for whatever happens in a premises, whether they are there or whether they're not there.
In terms of vicarious liability, is not right that they are responsible for every single action of every member of their staff when they are not at the premises. If they have properly trained staff who are there and running the business on their behalf, the DPS has carried out all due diligence to ensure that any offence is not committed. So it's not right to say that whatever happens, you can pin it on the DPS. That is not correct in law.
But you'd then have to outline what due diligence did she exercise when she chose not to be there and left it in the charge of Mr. Graham.
Because it was essentially, she knows the pub was not going to be open, so it's not trading, so she's not leaving the pub in charge of somebody else in terms of managing the sale of alcohol. She thought it was a village commemoration of VE Day by having effectively a street party with people in their front gardens. She didn't know or would have any understanding that Philip would then take the decision to allow people to have a drink, nor less charge for it by making a donation to the NHS. Philip is an experienced licensee. He's done the APLH course. He's in the process of applying for a personal license himself, which will happen in due course. It's Philip and Natalie's home. She left home knowing that the pub wasn't going to be open to the public and that it was a street party to celebrate VE Day. I don't see how she is then responsible for the decision he took.
Right. OK, I understand the point. It's entirely up to the members whether they conclude whether or not the pub was open or not open, because obviously PC Jeffries argues it is and you argue it wasn't. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from. That's fine. Sorry, if you go ahead then with your summing up.
Yeah. So in relation to this review, it is all related to the risk of the spread of the COVID virus. And as I've said, all the measures that have been put in place when the premises have reopened are working perfectly well. And of course, trade is not what it was. They're able to ensure all of the guidance regarding social distancing within the venue is complied with. And so that risk is simply not there. It was there just for that one day, not before, not after. The pub was not open. They were served with a prohibition notice, as were, I understand, other licensed premises, yet this is the only one that has been the subject of a review. And I would ask you that in all the circumstances, the most proportionate action to take is simply to issue a warning. It's not to revoke the premises licence, because the cause of the review is not there anymore. And I leave the matter there for you to make your decision. And thank you on behalf of the licence holder for the time in reading the papers. Obviously, you have a difficult decision to make and will have to deliberate. So we thank you again for your time in doing so.
Thank you. Andy, decision time. Do you want to come back on that?
Sorry, Chair, it took me, because I'm visually impaired, sometimes I struggle finding the cursor.
Apologies.
Yes, yeah. I mean, ultimately, members, you have got 5 working days in which you can make this decision and deliver it. My recommendation to you is that this is a difficult case where you are going to have to debate this for some time. We're going to formulate a decision, and I think you should, at this stage, make a decision not to announce the decision today. And that will give you time to capture that particular decision and announce it to people within that 5 working day period. That would be my recommendation to you, Chair. If you agree, then ultimately the meeting will effectively close. and we will notify people thereafter when the decision is formulated.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Andy. Yeah, I think I'd be in agreement with that. What are the other members, Graham? Sorry, sorry, I'm going to stop you there. I should have gone to the lady first. Sorry, Hazel.
Sorry.
What's your opinion?
Yes, this is a difficult case, as been said. So I would like the time to.
You're happy with that?
Thank you.
Okay, Graham.
Yeah, I would appreciate the time. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's my decision. We'll obviously there's a lot of debate to be done about this. So can I formally bring the meeting to a close at 12:01, and then PC Jeffries and all the other guests, thank you very much for your attendance today. You can, if you're happy to leave the meeting, and then we'll get on and conclude what we need to do.
Okay, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.